Okay, so I'm Rita Baragona. You know who Colleen is, most of you. I'm going to interview Colleen. So basically, interviewer. So this is Colleen's first solo exhibition at the Bowery Gallery. As you can see, she has quite a few paintings, 39 to be exact. And they include recent paintings from Maine, Long Island, Florida, as well as Portugal and Italy. And I think by the light you can kind of tell which ones are from where. She also has some from Brooklyn, where she lives. Her work is intimately scaled and notable for the visual patterns and nuanced color. Along with the landscapes, she has included still lifes, portraits of her family back here, and they're kind of hung in a thematic way. We will discuss the part memory plays in perception as it relates to Colleen's process, her choice of subject, and what she sees while painting. So my first question is, Colleen, the title of the show, why did you choose Seen and Remembered?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate you coming out today to listen. So the title Seen and Remembered, it actually didn't come that easily. It took me several days to come up with that. But what I was thinking about at the time was, you know, how can I represent what I'm painting and what I'm doing in my process of working? And I think, of course, as a perceptual painter, right, I'm trying to see the things that are in front of me. I'm trying to figure out how can I translate what is, you know, what is there, right, with also transferring a sense of the thing, like getting the essence of the thing, the sensibility of something. So definitely the scene is there. I sit there, I paint from life. I see things in front of me. But the remembering, the part of the remembering that comes into the name is that I don't paint that much from memory, but I think that during the process of me painting from life, a lot of what comes to mind is my remembrances, right? There's some sort of sense memory involved in the process of painting perceptually. And in the end, I really just want to paint something very simply to get at the essence of what's under the complexity. But the reason I'm also interested in that title is that in a recent article I read by David Brooks, he's a New York Times columnist you might be familiar with. He writes a lot on politics, but he also writes on other things such as behavioral things. And he in this particular article, and I brought copies for you guys, it's called You Are Not Who You Think You Are. So what he talks about in that article is that, you know, we grew up believing that imagining and seeing were very different things, right? So, you know, you see something in front of you, it's very tangible, you know what it is, it's there. But then the part about remembering, you know, the sense memory, it gets, when we start thinking about the different faculties, and what happens is there's so much going on in our minds that these concepts get very blurry between remembering and seeing. So the other thing I thought about was this quote from Bernard, who says, you know, I'm trying to do something I've never done before. Walk into a room, and when I walk into a room, I see everything at once, but I see nothing, right? So it's like, how do you transfer that? You know, so in the end, I'm trying to see things freshly as I look at them, but there's also this sense that things get, you know, are in your brain that get stuck there, and so you have preconceived notions of what you're looking at. That was a long answer, but anyway.
Okay, so this kind of follows. So when you're painting from nature, do you paint from pure perception? This is kind of similar to what you just said, responding to the light and forms of the moment. Or are you recalling remembered concepts of composition, color, etc.? Can you break down your process just a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, so I definitely feel like I'm very strongly in the realm of perceptual painting. So I look at the thing, I see it. So the pure seeing aspect, as you describe it, Rita, is very important to me. But, you know, the thing that first draws me in is the light. It's always the light. It's like, I'm like a, you know, fly to honey. I'm looking at that light, I see it, I want to go right into it. But at the same time, I'm thinking of structure, I'm thinking of color compositions and relationships, and where am I going to put this shape and form, and how much space is going to be in the front, all that stuff that we do as painters, right? But what happens is, I think, again, back to this theory of the brain and the memory and all of that, I think our brains are processing so much information at one time that there are definitely things going on at the same time, or they feel simultaneous. They feel like they're happening at the same time. So I think it's this unconscious remembering of things, like how to make a painting, right? We've been painting for a long time. I've been composing. I've been painting for 30 years. So all these things that I know about how to construct a painting are coming back to me as I do it, but also my experiences. And that's more of the emotional connection to what I'm looking at. And I think the experiential thing is very important, and it's what draws you into it, right? So, you know, in the end, I'm just striving to do something, to see something very simply and create a quiet harmony. And that was one of the things I heard a lot about my show is it's very quiet, it's very quiet. And so I was really happy because I do want quiet from, you know, get away from the madness of this world. I want a quiet moment where there's harmony in what I'm looking at. And the interesting thing is in the past few years to make money, my money job, is I teach classes to business people on how to think more creatively. It's really fun. And so I have to teach them how to use different parts of their brain and, you know, do these exercises that help them access different parts. So consequently, over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of reading on the research and books and all these theories around how the brain works. So it fascinates me. But the more I read, the more I realize we don't know anything about the brain. It's so complicated. So, yeah, anyway.
So to go back to David Brooks's op-ed, what he says about observation and memory is, observation feels like it's a transparent process. You open your eyes and take in stuff. In fact, much of, or most of what you're seeing is making mental predictions. I love this. Making mental predictions about what you expect to see based on experience, and then you use your sensory input to check and adjust your predictions. That's kind of cool.
That's great. That's great.
Thus, your memory profoundly influences what you see. He also goes on to say, or Anil Seth says, perceptions come from the inside out just as much as they come from the outside in. He goes on to say, the conversation between sense and memory produces what he calls controlled hallucination, cool word, which is the closest we're going to get to actually knowing what reality looks like. So, what's controlled hallucination to you?
Wow. I heard that term and I was like, what? That is so cool. It resonated with me. I had just named the show, Seen and Remembered. And I read that article and I was like, oh my God, he gets it. But who said controlled hallucination wasn't David Brooks. He was quoting, as you said, Anil Seth. He's a neuroscientist. He's fascinating. There's some YouTube videos out there. I would recommend you listen to them. Because as you said, Rita, he's talking about this sensibility that we bring together of what is outside, you know, obviously external to us, and what is internal to us, and that coming together is really what he's talking about when he's talking about this controlled hallucination. So the way he explained it was, you know, you might think you know what something, the difference is between seeing and between sensing and imagining. No, I'm sorry, between seeing and imagining, right? But when you study something and it's really there, I think I said this before, when you know, when you're making it up in your head. But so these feel very different. But they did this study, which was very interesting. They've done a lot of studies on this. They took groups of people and they asked one group to imagine a tomato, right? What does a tomato look like? Now, people have seen tomatoes in their lives, so they were accessing their memory, right? One they were imagining in their heads. Took the other group and he said, okay, look at this. It was a barely visible image of a tomato. So they had some image in there and they could recall that image. But what they did was they did this MRI hookup thing where they look at areas of the brain that light up. So as these two different groups were doing these two different processes that we think are very different, they were actually accessing the same parts of the brain to do the same thing, both seeing and remembering. So it was really, really interesting to me that you know, it's kind of very apparent that there's a lot of blurriness.
So for me, I read Livingstone, who was a neurobiologist as well, who wrote Seeing and Art, and again, a book to recommend. And she says we gather sensations with our eyes, which are codified in the mind. So it's a scientific description, and in a way, controlled hallucination is a kind of poetic way of saying the same thing. And you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah, well, I think I was going to say something. I was going to say that I think the more we paint things, we feel it's very intuitive, right? So, but the fact that it's drawing on things that are embedded in our brains, we don't even realize it's happening, is really, it's because it becomes. But those processes are analytical, which is really on the opposite scale of creativity. Analytics, creativity, intuition, and creativity, they're very different, like poles.
Yeah, so I like to use the word sensibility to encompass what art really is, or what art making is. You can break down the word into sensation is your eyes, sense is your mind, how you're remembering, ability is your hand, and sensitivity is your heart. And they're all in that word. And I've added intuition. I've always felt that I was painting from my intuition or just my feeling, and saying that I was into it and fully present. And this has changed how I think, because now I'm starting to say, yeah, how much am I remembering? When I think I'm into it totally and completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's because it's emotional. When we're looking, I don't know, the emotion plays in there. And I think that makes us feel that it's much more present, that sensing piece of it.
So there's a meeting of the inner and the outer sensibilities in the way.
Absolutely.
So let's look at a few specific paintings. When you talked to me, you talked about these two paintings of your sister, Mary Jo. And let's talk about them in terms of memory. She's your older sister.
Yeah.
And and you can just explain.
Yeah. So, okay. So she's my older sister. We are actually very close. We've always been very close. I think when I was young, I grew up in a family of 6 kids. So your mom's busy. When you have 6 kids, she's always busy. So you kind of have a secondary mother, and she was my secondary mother. She was like my protector. If anything happened, my big brothers were getting, on me or whatever. She was my protector. So, in any event, she lives in Brooklyn now, and so this painting on the left, I painted directly from life. That was, she sat for me. And I did it completely from observation. If you'll notice her mouth open, everybody always comments on that, So some people think she's singing or, whatever, she's making a joke, but actually she's ill now. She's been ill for the last 15 years. She has a lot of problems, which I won't go into, but the medications that she takes, her mouth opens because of the medications. So while I was painting her, I'm like, Mare, just close your mouth for a minute. Just close it. I want to catch your mouth. I was like, forget it. You know what? That's who you are. I'm going to paint you with your mouth open. So I did. I painted it like that. And the other painting on the right is also her. And some people say, that's the same person? And I'm like, yeah, that's the same person. It was painted around about the same time, from life as well. But what happened was I got very involved in painting the red jacket. I was like enthralled with these, different forms and everything, and I got really into it. And she can't sit for that long, and I didn't get to finish the head. So I was like, ugh. And then she was hospitalized the whole night. No, so I couldn't finish the painting. So I had photographs of her, which I accessed and I looked at. But I don't, when I paint from photos, I don't like say, oh, let me copy the photo. It's like I'm just getting hints from the photo. So that's what I did. And after I finished it, I looked at it and I said, oh my God, this looks like she looked 30 years ago. Like when she was well, when she wasn't ill. And I was like, in fact, if I look back on pictures that I have of her from that period, she looks like that, So it's like, where did that come from, So it's interesting how that plays into that remembering of who somebody was and what they mean to you, I think plays into when you're doing portraits of people, especially. So now the tides have turned. I'm her protector, if you will, and we're still very close, but sorry she couldn't be here.
So if you can most of you can see the self-portrait that's over the sign-in desk. In that one, the face is obliterated. And I'm curious to how come.
Yeah.
When I look at it as a female viewer, I bring my own issues into it, and I'm wondering, is it psychological that the face is so blurred out?
It's funny, Rita, because since you brought that up, at first I was like, no, it's not psychological at all. But the more I'm like looking at it, I'm like, maybe you got something there, Rita. But, you know, who knows, who knows. But truthfully, at the time, that's probably the oldest painting in the room. When I was doing that, I was really just I wanted a model. And I didn't have a model, and so here I am, I'm the model. I look in the mirror. I wanted to paint a figure entering a room, almost as if coming through, you know, like a doorway, and like into a new way of, kind of like a rebirth was on my mind. So I didn't care if it was me, I just wanted it to be a figure. And I think I had been looking at Morandi a lot, so I was like, no, just paint the form, just get the essence of what this figure is. And the other thing is, you know, I think it's as important what you say as what you don't say, right? So I wanted to leave a lot out, similar to this painting. I wanted to leave things out because I think there's more power in trying to oversay something. So in that painting, I definitely, you know, as I said, I was scraping down a lot. I was eliminating, I was erasing, and that's part of my process. I like to take away a lot. And especially if a painting isn't working, I'll be like, you know, and this is where, you know, I spent some time with Leonard Anderson, and he's definitely been a big influence on me. I didn't know him until later in his life, and I actually was the last portrait that he painted, which I was honored. So I spent a lot of time with him in his studio in his last few years. And one thing he would say is that, you know, if you're really desperate about a painting, just wipe it out. No, actually what he would say is, and Chris, you would know this, if you study with him, take your painting and just like put it on the ground, smush it around, pick it up, and it's going to be 99% better. Because what's happening is you're unifying the painting, right? You're not worrying about the dab here, the dab there, the dab there, da-da. No, it's not separated. It's become a unified whole. So I think there was a lot of that going on when I was working on that painting, of get back to the whole, you know, thing.
Cool. Some of your paintings look a little bit like narratives. For example, some people have said to me that a painting like this has a kind of narrative. Were you painting a narrative?
No, I was not. I'm on the oath of law. No, I was not. No, I do not think of narrative when I paint any painting at all. I'm just thinking of, again, the light, the space. I'm interested in how this thing is going to sit on a flat surface. But now the more that I think about the mind and the brain and all that stuff, I'm wondering if there isn't some sort of sense of narrative. What happens to me is once I paint a painting, I find the narrative after it. You know, I'll start saying, oh, yeah, you know, well, especially like this one. This one looks like the chairs are talking to one another, you know? It's like, so something happens here. There's like, even though there's no humans in here or that one, there's like the residue of people, of some sort of story happening. But I don't set out to say, okay, you know, one day I hung the line, you know, the clothes on the line. I don't do that. Even with the still lifes, I'll start to set them up. I like the way their, you know, shapes are relating to one another. But inevitably, I'll start thinking, oh, yeah, that's the mama and that's the baby and this is the, you know. So there's like these kind of human relationships that start to happen once you start painting them. I don't know why, but that's what happens.
I do that too.
But this, yeah, so it was really just the light, you know, the way the clothes hit the light. It was very intuitive. I actually, this one, in terms of remembering, I think there's something going on here too. This is Leonard Anderson's yard. So for the past 8 years, we've rented his place up in Brunswick, Maine. And I've done a clothesline painting every year. Every year we go there. I have probably like a dozen clothesline paintings. So the more I was painting it, the more I was familiar with it and getting freer and freer with it. This one is a little more, you know, like focused in on a little more detailed with the clothes. But this one was special. I decided, I usually do them in the morning. This one I did in the afternoon. And what I did was I turned around on the other side of the line and I wanted to incorporate more landscape and the space, right? So when I was young, my dad, he bought a place in Greenport, Long Island, and we were right on the water. And I think there's a feeling about this place that makes me feel that I'm in Greenport. you know, and it's sort of this, I don't know, it's just this feeling that I get when I'm there. And also when I was painting this, I felt Leonard's spirit. I really did. He had passed away already, you know, obviously he passed away a few years ago. But his presence in that cabin is still very strong. And I just felt like he was there with me and like painting, and it went really, really without a struggle. It was interesting. And of course I love Lois Dodd's clotheslines. She's definitely inspired me as well.
So can you talk about the importance of finding harmony that realizes your sensations of color, air, and space?
Yeah, so the harmony, I think that I equate that with the word, again, back to Leonard. This was another very important lesson that I think I learned from him, where he talked about not just painting a place, but painting the quality of a place, right? And what did he mean by that? He meant, okay, yes, you've got tone, you've got color relationships, you've got spatial relationships, but the quality of the place is the essence. It's what were you feeling when you were there? What's not necessary in this painting? You don't need to, you know, you don't have to put everything in there. What's the least you can put in there that will express your feeling when you're there? He also talked about keeping the edges very soft and not locking into shapes too soon, because you want an openness, you want an exploration. And I really felt that when I was doing this. I was like, just keep it loose, keep exploring, keep finding new shapes and relationships. So, so to me, anyway, this sense of harmony, I think in the paintings it's successful in are the ones where others feel the sense of space, okay? Well, I was thrilled at the opening night. There was somebody looking at that painting over there of Florida, and they were like, oh my God, I could feel the humidity in the air. It was very hot there, right? And I said, yeah, you should have seen it. The mosquitoes were on me like crazy. You know, you be careful when you go up there. You're probably going to have a mosquito jump out at you. But, you know, it was just this feeling that came from the essence of that. So it's not about getting every little detail right. You know, it's really just about what you're feeling. And I think the window speaks to that as well. It's, you know, it's getting the larger sweep of things, being able to move back and forth in space. And, yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Could it be that what kills a painting is the memory of what you should put in rather than relying on sensory input?
That is a really great question. And I think that the thing is, we always want to see things freshly, right? So it's dangerous because even if you go back to the same motifs, you can say, oh, I know what that tree looks like. I've seen it 100 times. I see it every day when I walk out my door. But the important thing is that it's always going to be different. You're going to be in a different time. You're going to be in a different space. You're going to be a different person, right? So maybe the color of the bark against the sky is going to be different than it was, even on the same temperature day. I love this. I wanted to quote Charles Hawthorne because he talks about that beauty in art is the delicious notes of color, one against the other. All we have to do is get the color notes in proper relationship, right? And I'm like, wow, that sounds so easy. How do you do that, you know? But, you know, again, Leonard talks a lot about, it has a lot to do with comparison. You know, like what does this thing look like against another thing? And, you know, so I think we're constantly seeking to see new things in things, which is a human instinct, right? And Hawthorne says, painting is a matter of impulse. It's a matter of getting out into nature and having some joy in registering it. And if that's what we get out of it, that's great, right? Joy. So.
There's a quote from Matisse. I can't remember it exactly, I'm paraphrasing. But he said, somebody asked him what the hardest thing was in painting, and he said, to be able to continue what you first knew about a picture. So, in a sense, the memory of what you thought it was as you're painting and you're getting involved in all the particulars.
He also said, remember, he said, when I look back at my paintings, there's not one painting that I wouldn't have done differently than I would today, than I would have done. You know what I mean? Like he would have been different. He's different. So,
So let's talk about the landscapes. There's quite a few in the show. Is painting from the landscape more about seeing in the moment and less about memory?
Again, I go back to this duality, you know, this combination of both, right? So,
Is there a duality?
yeah, exactly. And again, so another essay I was reading on Bernard was, you know, that thing where he talks about, well, the person who was writing about Bernard said he's not just responding to nature, he's responding to himself in nature and the changes that lie there within, right? So again, we're not isolated from it. We're there, and we have all this stuff that's in our heads. So how do you isolate that out from the current experience? You know, those things hang on, right? You know, I grew up on Long Island, so I love trees, I love landscapes, I love fields of green, you know. I'm drawn to that, and I think it's because it's in a sense, it's familiar to me, right? My husband Bob and I go out painting, and we have fights all the time because he wants architecture, he wants structure, he wants, you know, buildings, and I'm like, no, I want this, you want that. Well, he grew up in Brooklyn, so of course he's drawn to that. That's his sensibility, right? So anyway, yeah, in terms of the landscape process, you know, I've always thought of myself as primarily a landscape painter. People would ask me, what kind of painter are you? And I'd say, I'm a landscape painter. But then I realized that I do just as many still lifes, probably because you have more months over the, you know, fall and winter that you're indoors and you can't really go out there unless your lowest out at 50 below weather painting landscapes. So I do just as many still lifes as I do. But the thing about the landscapes is they're done in a place where I have a very limited amount of time, right? And any of you who know and go out plein air painting, similar for you, you know, the ones from Portugal and Italy. Portugal, it was a luxury because I was there for a month. Italy, you know, maybe I'm there 2 weeks. Same with, you know, Maine, we're there 2 weeks. So you have a very limited amount of time. So I have to be very structured and disciplined about going out. Even when I'm at Leonard's, I act like I'm on a residency. I got to go out 3 times a day, you know, catch different lights and be very disciplined because most of the paintings are done in a 3-hour window. And, you know, after 3 hours, forget it. The lights changed. You have to stop. And you just, you know, that's it. You either hit it or you don't.
What does hitting it mean?
Well, I think the idea of hitting it is, I had to think about this a lot, Rita, but I think all I can simply say is that you've achieved something that you wanted to say, right? And something that you feel good about saying. I'm not saying that everyone I go out and do, I hit it. No, I mean, you know, I think my you know, the rate is getting better, you know, but I've had a lot of clunkers, you know, you go out there and you don't know what you did because you're so involved and enmeshed in painting that 3 hours go by quickly. But I like what Lois Dodds said about when she was asked when she knew her painting was finished. She says, she's so pragmatic, and I know you know her personally, so you'll appreciate this. She says, you know, it's finished. Usually when I put the last stroke down, it's done. There's nothing more to say. You know, there's nothing more to put down, and it's pretty clear. It's not a problem of when to stop. And I'm like, I wish I knew when to stop as much as she did, but, you know, because I do have a tendency to maybe go back in, and my husband's good at this. He's like, stop! Don't do anymore. It's good, you know. So you have to really step back and say, okay, I've hit it. But I do think I work well under pressure. That's part of me that I get this extra adrenaline when I'm out there, and I know I only have 3 hours and I have to do it. You know, you're dealing with a lot when you're out there. The elements, all the stuff you got to carry with you. You know, I have a list of 40 things. God forbid you forget one thing. You're kind of stranded out there, and you can't paint for the day. Or you try to, and, you know, it's not very successful. So anyway, yeah, the studio is a much more comfortable place to be, but and it's a much slower pace. But I think there's something, the expediency of, you know, being in the landscape to me is very exciting. And I think it's when I hit it, it's about my inner sensibility. It's in confluence with my outer sensation. I would say going back to that controlled hallucination. So it's going, you know, looking deeper than the surface, you know, into things that you didn't see when you first looked at it, and my inner feelings about it. It's a very perceptual experience. So, and I think the two of them merge together very well when you're outdoors painting from the landscape.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I
Yeah,
feel
well,
it's
you're a
not
landscape.
duality, but you're realizing your sensations.
Yeah.
So shows are a turning point in your process, a time to examine your work in a group, to listen to what others have to say, and sort of think about it. So I'm curious, what have you learned from this show?
That's a really, really good question. I haven't had that much time to reflect yet because I'm still in the whirlwind of having the show. But I think some glimpses of what I have learned. First of all, I've never seen this much of my work in one space. I just don't have a space big enough to do that. So to look at it in retrospect, to see everything that I've done over the last 2 years, I was like, wow. I'm always pressuring. I'm like, I'm not doing enough work. I'm not doing enough. No. I sat back and I said, well, I guess I did some work, you know? So that felt good. But the process of selecting work to put in the show was really challenging. I do have lots more paintings in my studio. And there were probably 5 paintings in the show that are in this show that I wasn't going to put in. So it's really, I think it's really good to have an objective eye. Thank you. My husband, Bob, helped me. Like 4 of the paintings I wasn't going to put in, a lot of people were really drawn to them. And they really looked at them. And I even sold a few of them. So I was like, oh, good. Thanks for giving me that. So I think it's important for others to look at your work. But most importantly, what I have really mostly enjoyed is people looking at my work and talking to me about it. Like, and these adjectives they're coming up with, like, you know, quiet and, you know, thoughtful. And I'm like hanging on to them like, oh my God, I could live on that compliment for 6 months. You know, it's like, it feels so good to be acknowledged. I think that's the main feeling. Rita, this is my first show ever. I mean, this is not just my first show at the Bowery Gallery. This is my first show ever. So I think that, yeah, it's really, what I've taken from this is a lot of, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I feel acknowledgement, yeah. And we should hold on to that. If you guys get acknowledged, hold on to it, because we have a tendency to say, oh, no, it's not a big deal. But I'm holding on to it, so thank you.
I really appreciated being in this room with the kind of quiet that resonates with me. So thank you.
Thank you.
To sum up, we have talked about the influence of memory on the act of seeing and on Colleen's painting process. Her paintings express beautifully an intimate relationship with her subjects. I think she really gets at the controlled hallucination, whether you agree it's a hallucination or not. I'm not so sure I agree. We have discussed the dual nature of memory and seeing, and I believe it's impossible to separate them out. I think we've said that several times. Perhaps the problem is our Western habit of thinking in conceptual dichotomies.
Yeah, I would agree. And actually, it's interesting you say that, Rita, because at the end of this article, David Brooks conjectures, he says, you know, maybe in 50 years, the terms like emotion and reason will be obsolete, right? Some genius, future genius, is going to come up with a more integrative way of expressing and more accurately capturing how we think, who we are and how we think. And that, you know, I think is it's closer to sensibility, right? Which is what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think each of us as artists, and those of us who appreciate art, I think art is nonverbal, and it gives you a way into that non-duality, among other things.
Yeah.
See each thing differently, and we're each going to respond to different paintings of Colleen's, partly because of our memories, and partly for the ways we codify our own sensations. I really appreciate listening to Colleen talk about her paintings because I resonate with so much of what, in my process, with what you do. So I'm going to open it up to everybody. If you have any questions or any comments you'd like to say, to ask Colleen, I would appreciate it.
No. Oh, no. I learned to.